Good morning, everyone. I'm Sumant Kulkarni, a senior biotechnology analyst for Canaccord Genuity. I'd like to welcome you to Stoke Therapeutics presentation here today. It's actually not a presentation, it's an interactive Q&A. So please feel free to raise your hands in case you have any questions. You had some really interesting data last night. We'll go into that. But before that, thanks for making it here. We have Ian Smith, the CEO, and Jason Hoyt, who's the Chief Patient Officer. And out there in the audience, we have Doug Snow, who knows everything about the company as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys to make a brief intro, and then we'll go into Q&A.
Yes, so thank you for joining us today. I'm Ian Smith. I'm the Interim Chief Executive Officer of Stoke Therapeutics. Look forward to the next 24 minutes as it ticks down and answering your questions. And with me, I've got Jason, who can introduce himself as well.
Yeah, I'm Jason Hoyt. I'm the Chief Patient Officer at Stoke, responsible for commercial medical affairs and manufacturing.
And then just as a couple of introductory remarks, please refer to our SEC filings for safe harbor statements. Just a quick update. We did have a quarterly conference call yesterday evening where we had the opportunity to update investors and the analyst community of the progress the company has been making with its lead program in Dravet syndrome. We believe it's a disease-modifying medicine, and we were able to show last night for the first time data from patients that have now been on drug between 3 and 4 years. And what that data showed last night was a significant reductions in seizures in these patients that were durable and maintained out through a longer term. And also we see cognition and behavioral benefits over a longer term as well. Going to the profile of the medicine to treat Dravet, for those of you that are not familiar with Dravet syndrome itself, it's a genetic disease where unfortunately children they develop through 2 years old, but then they pretty much exist in a vegetative state from 2 years onwards. They suffer from severe seizures and neurocognitively do not develop. And so they can be 20 years old having severe seizures and still be like a 2-year-old. What our medicine is doing in the studies that we've seen so far is it is significantly reducing these seizures. That seizure reduction is on top of current standard of care anti-seizure medicines, and then the medicine is also causing a more neurotypical development of these children as they stay on the medicine. The medicine works by upregulating NaV1.1 in the brain, which is the root cause of Dravet syndrome, and we're very happy with the results to date. This week we also announced that we have commenced our phase 3 program, and I'm sure we'll talk about that today, and we are well on our way. The pipeline is also expanding. We announced going into another clinical program last night, ADOA, which is optic atrophy, and it's a progressive loss of eyesight. Again, treating it in a very similar way to Dravet syndrome, where we're upregulating OPA1 and increasing mitochondrial function to help with vision. And that study is starting in the second half of this year. And company's financial position is strong. We ended the quarter with $355 million of capital, and we continue to receive funding from Biogen. They have a partnership, an ex-US collaboration, ex-North American collaboration, where they also fund 30% of Dravet development. And company is fully capitalized, fully funded through to mid-2028, and which is beyond when the phase 3 should read out. And so happy to take questions and look forward to this.
Well, thanks, Ian, for that really nice summary. And you placed the unmet need in cortex there in Dravet syndrome. So given that you have between 3 to 4 years data now, and given the unmet need, what's the best thing you can do to get this product much faster in the hands of patients?
Appreciate that being the first question. So just to talk about the data and the medicine itself. First of all, Dravet it's a horrific disease. I mentioned it briefly that these children are born with it, and by the time they're 1 or 2 years old, they're suffering from seizures, and they they then start to plateau in terms of their neurodevelopment. And if you've ever met a Dravet syndrome patient, it's effectively maybe a teenager or a 20-year-old, and they're effectively a 2-year-old, and they're still suffering from seizures. Our medicine in earlier trials has shown that we reduce these seizures, but also show that we improve cognition and benefit. We took that data to the FDA and in 2024, and we were ascribed breakthrough designation. I say that importantly because the FDA gave us breakthrough designation for Dravet syndrome, not for treating seizures. It was for the syndrome itself, which therefore the FDA acknowledged safety and efficacy data that does actually treat both the seizures and the cognition and behavioral challenges that these children go through. Given the status of the drug and the data that we've had and the data we showed last night, we're going to take all that data under breakthrough designation and talk to the FDA in the second half of this year. I will point out that that is a perfunctory process of breakthrough designation, where following gathering the designated class of breakthrough, you've got a responsibility to go to the FDA, explain the magnitude of the disease, explain the data of the medicine, and how that may address the disease. We plan on doing that in the second half of the year. To your question specifically, we're going to have a discussion about how we can get this medicine to the patients as fast as we possibly can. That could be in a number of different ways, and that's the discussion that will ensue with the FDA with all this data in hand in the second half of this year. I'll just close by saying we're also happy that we have a phase 3 study that has commenced. First dose was just recently. It's a 150 patient study, and we already have 150 patients in pre-screening. And so that will be part of the discussion with the FDA, because as of now, we're planning to run a phase 3 program.
Right. So you've said FDA a number of times. We've seen the FDA in the news a number of times over the last few weeks, if not months, on all the changes that are that agency seems to be undergoing. So given that, has the composition of the team that you've been speaking with remained largely the same? How have the interactions evolved over time? Has the agency expressed any kind of view or desire to be regulatorily flexible in this context?
I'd start more on the macro, which is, yes, there's been a lot of changes down at the FDA. For us personally, given the medicine that we have, given the disease area that we're working in, it is a genetic pediatric disease. We're not seeing any changes. And for the people that we work with at the FDA, I would say that when we look from the outside in and look to see what's shuffling around at the FDA, we don't actually see impact in rare pediatric diseases, especially ones that have this massive, significant unmet need. And it's part of the reason why we're actually looking forward to going to the FDA to discuss all this data. We're actually seeing the FDA leaning more forward to these kind of medicines in these kind of disease areas for kids.
So now that you have these quite striking 36-month data in hand, what would be a specific mode of approval or the pathway that you could potentially use to get a faster approval? And I'm not using the word accelerated specifically, but...
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. It's difficult to name pathways because I believe it's an iterative process. At this point in time, we're sharing the data, we're helping them understand the magnitude and the horrific nature of this disease, and that's a broad discussion. But for me to sit here today to say this is the pathway, I'm not in a position to do that. But it will be an iterative process. The overriding goal is how can we get this medicine to patients as soon as possible. I will also note that part of the 3-year data, despite showing the durability of seizure reductions and the extension of cognition and behavioral benefits, there is also now 3 to 4 years worth of safety data. We've dosed, there's probably more than 800 doses of this drug, and we've been dosing over a period of up to 4, maybe longer than 4 years as well. That will be a very important aspect of this discussion with the FDA.
So clearly you have reduction in seizure frequency over on top of standard of care. You have Vineland scores. You have a bunch of things that you've collected data-wise. Is there anything in that that can be used as a biomarker for the basis of an accelerated approval?
So when you refer to accelerated approval in that way, Samantha, that's capital A, capital A. As in, you go to the FDA, you've got a correlated biomarker that correlates to clinical benefit, and you get approval based on the biomarker and run a confirmatory phase 3. I want to be clear, that's not the route that we're going down. If we had a biomarker in this disease, it would be able to measure NAV 1.1. We're unable to measure NAV 1.1 unless we were to do brain biopsies, and we're not about to do brain biopsies. And so it's a broader discussion in terms of all the clinical data, in terms of, do you believe the benefit we're providing? Do you believe the safety profile would support the drug going to the patient earlier? And that's why it's a discussion and a collection of all this data.
Right. So I guess in terms of milestones that we can expect from now through the end of the year or maybe a little into the next year, the key one is going to be your meeting with the FDA and the outcome of that meeting. Is that right?
I don't look at that meeting as a single milestone and a yes/no. Just to be clear, I look at it, the regulatory interactions are an ongoing process. Sharing data and having discussion, asking questions, getting responses, coming back and answering their questions, frankly. And so I don't look at it as a binary yes/no. I look at it as more an iterative, longer-term process. And if anything was to change from our current guidelines in terms of running a phase 3 program, which we anticipate will fully recruit in the second half of next year, and therefore data in the second half of 2027 will update immediately. But at this point in time, understand the FDA and regulatory interactions are a discussion, iterative process, and we're focused on executing on our phase 3 program.
Right. So we've focused mostly on the US so far, but you do have a partnership with Biogen. First, could you just go a little bit more into how all that came about? And second, are there any geographies outside the US where you could get this product out to patients faster, given the data that you've generated?
Yeah, so Jason on my right-hand side here is our Chief Patient Officer. What that means is he's responsible for commercial, medical affairs, and also manufacturing. I'll ask him to talk about the markets outside the US. In terms of the Biogen process, I was working with the company through that process, and it was the usual decision by the company, which is you only do a collaboration if it enhances the company's capabilities to deliver a medicine to patients faster. It's not, most people look at it, well, a lot of people look at collaborations as being a way to finance the company. That was not the primary purpose of doing a collaboration. The primary purpose of doing a collaboration was to add the capability of the company that we didn't otherwise have. And that was to get the drug to patients outside of North American markets as fast as possible in these single-payer markets, which are a challenge. And so we ran a competitive process, as you always do. And we always were leaning into Biogen. The reason we lent into Biogen was because they have Spinraza, and they've been shown to be excellent with their expansive capabilities outside of the US. And so we hoped for Biogen, and they were there as a kind of a lead candidate to do the collaboration. And because it was competitive, we were able to manage the economics that were secondary but important, that actually enhanced the company's balance sheet, partially funded the phase 3 trial, and from a financial position has put the company in a position where we don't need to raise capital. We can run our phase 3 program, gather the data, and get into launch readiness. And we're very happy it's Biogen. The partnership's been in place now for about 6 months. It's been excellent collaboration. The teams are working very well together. And we go backwards and forwards across the Atlantic, frankly, in medical conferences recently, and we're about to go to one at Labor Day. With that, I'll turn that to Jason.
Yeah, I think, from a partnership perspective, I think one of the things that really appealed to us with Biogen is the fact that, as Ian mentioned, with Spinraza being available in more than 70 markets around the world, they have that in-market infrastructure that would take us years to build. And we felt an obligation to make sure that we were able to get this important medicine to patients as fast as possible upon a potential approval, right? And with Biogen having that infrastructure already in place, it's just a seamless process for them to be able to get zorevunersen to patients far faster than we could have done ourselves. And we're really excited about the way the partnership has started and the way that we're engaging with their teams throughout the world. Frankly, there's a really high level of executive engagement in the partnership, which is great to see.
Maybe touch on some of the markets outside the North America and beyond, let's say, the key geographies.
In terms of
What other countries could we go to other than UK, Japan, Europe?
Yeah. I mean, they're in more than 70 markets across the entirety of Europe, into Asia, into markets in Latin America, Australia, other markets that, frankly, wouldn't have been the first tier for us to build in-market infrastructure. We would have been prioritizing the 7 core markets, which would be the EU5, US, and Japan. And through the Biogen partnership, we are now able to get this into all of the countries in Europe and beyond, essentially right after an approval, which is really exciting for patients and families.
It's a global disease.
Right, it is. And any specific regions within those that are amenable to a faster pathway towards getting the product to patients?
Well, I feel that Europe specifically, Europe and UK, one could cast an umbrella over Europe and UK, but certainly they have regulatory processes that you can appeal to, I would say, based on data, and so that would be a primary one. And so we'll see how it progresses. We'll have to work with Biogen. That's their territory commercially, and so we'll work with Biogen to discuss that.
Last one on the Biogen collaboration. How do you discuss going about eventual pricing, commercialization activities, and all that with the partner?
Yeah, so we're in active conversations with Biogen. I think we have a strong desire to have one global brand with global brand elements that are consistent around the world. Obviously, from a pricing perspective, we control North America and they control everything outside of North America, so we won't have any input on their pricing strategy and they won't on ours. But across elements of branding and messaging and ultimately patient access, we're actively working together and learning, frankly, from some of the experiences they had in launching Spinraza in many of the markets around the world.
So now we'll move to the phase 3. You've just started a trial for zorevunersen in Dravet syndrome. Could you give us some context around how enrollment is progressing, pre-screening, all of that, and how that might help you pull off this trial in a really successful way?
Yes, so thanks, Samantha. I'll first of all start by describing the phase 3 trial. It's 170 patients. It's being run in US, UK, Japan, and Europe. And its primary endpoint is at week 28, which is a measure of seizure reductions against sham control. And week 52 is the secondary endpoint, which is durability of seizure reductions, but then also cognition and behavioral benefits as measured by Vineland-3. That's the design of the study. It is dosing of 2 70 milligram doses of the drug and 2 doses of 45 milligrams throughout that 52-week period. The study is up and running. We've dosed the first patient. We announced that earlier this week. I mentioned it's a 170-patient study. As of last night on our earnings call, we did also announce that we've got 150 patients in pre-screening. Obviously, the challenge is not just bring those 150 patients into the study all at once. We'd love to do that, but the rate-limiting feature here is opening up all the treating centers or the clinical trial sites. And so we're working through that process. We've made great progress, and we anticipate fully recruiting the trial into the second half of next year, because it's a 52-week trial delivering data from the phase 3 trial in the second half of 2027.
Given this is a disease that can be tracked over time once people are on the product, is there potential for an interim readout in your phase 3 that could be before your primary endpoint?
Yeah, I would say that possibly there is potential for that. I think that would all be under that discussion we had earlier, Samantha, when we talked about the discussion on the breakthrough designation. I think that's one thing that we could have a discussion with the FDA about. You've got to be careful with breaking the blind at week 28 because of the hit on the alpha and the powering of the study. But I would put that under the kind of the headline of discussing under breakthrough designation with the FDA pathways to the patient faster. If anything changes on our timeline, whether it's recruitment or filing, obviously we'll update investors immediately.
Right. So we haven't really seen any approaches like this where you're trying to manage the whole syndrome for Dravet before. You're in a phase 3 now. How confident are you that your phase 3 trial includes a long enough time frame to get a symptom management claim on an eventual label on approval?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that's often asked by investors. So maybe if, in terms of the mechanism of action and the onset of the benefits, seizure reductions happens pretty quickly, early on in that 52-week period. So, and so very comfortable with that, and that's been shown in our phase 2 studies. What we've also shown in our phase 1/2 studies is actually the onset and the benefit of cognition and behavioral benefits, which also occurs after 9 months. But more recently, just a couple of weeks ago, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, we showed data at a medical conference where we showed a dosing level that's similar and consistent to our phase 3, and what the cognition and behavioral benefits were of that. And we showed these dramatic improvements in cognition and behavior from that dosing level that was similar and consistent to the phase 3. So the study is well powered in terms of the 52-week period and the number of patients that are coming into the study. And I'll give credit to the team back at Stoke, because the way they designed this study was actually for basically a p-value of 0.01 and a 90% confidence level. And that's what you should do with these medicines. You don't want to cut corners. Running a 100 or 120 patient study for timeline is that's just short-term thinking. And so we've powered the study adequately based on the phase 2 data that we have, and I would say somewhat conservatively. And we did decide to run a 52-week study so we could see that full benefit from dosing of the medicine.
So going to the syndrome management aspect, you have the Vineland scale. What aspects of that scale are most relevant, and could you reiterate what sort of point changes are clinically relevant on that? Because that, I think, is a key point.
Yeah, another great question, because Vineland is not known by many people. But Vineland is a score that is done by neuropsychologists. And for the phase 3, we basically have central readers of this. They meet with the patients at baseline, and then they score them at different points towards the end of the trial. Vineland has multiple domains that range from expressive, receptive communication, motor skills, fine motor skills, and leading to quality of life measures. What we're told by physicians, family members, caregivers, that the two most important measures are expressive and receptive communication. What that means is if I was to turn to you and say, "Hey, Samant," and you looked at me as you are doing, that's really important to parents. And that will get a score. If you do actually look at me, you get a score. Have to understand that these kids do not recognize the parents. They do not look up. They do not recognize their name. And so what we've seen is that our medicine does actually give back that ability over a period of time. And we're told that from the neuropsychs and the understanding of Vineland that a clinical score or a Vineland score of 2 to 3 points is clinically meaningful. If you look at the EPNS data from the conference I spoke about just now, if you look to see what kind of measures we're getting in from that dosing level that's similar to the phase 3, you're seeing scores of 8 and 9. I would also add, and fortunately, the scores are higher in the expressive and the receptive communication domains. I would also add that in AES, another medical conference, December 2024, physicians presented data in terms of the practicality by showing videos of these patients that have been on our drug. And we're thrilled to the physician did this, but we have patients that frankly can't do buttons on their blouse. They go on our medicine, they can do buttons on their blouse. They can't write notes, so they can suddenly write nice clear lists of 1 through 10. We have, a physician telling us that there's somebody that was in a wheelchair and now is no longer in a wheelchair. And so these aren't anecdotal. They've been presented by physicians at medical conferences. There's actually videos of them if you want to see them from AES December 2024. So those are the key domains of what we're trying to measure and trying to help you understand the practicality of real life of what a Vineland score means. But it is 2 to 3 points, but in that EPNS data you see that we're getting effectively 8, 9, and 10 points of Vineland.
All right. We have a few seconds, so I'll just squeeze in 2 questions. One, with a disease state like this and with a potential therapeutic approach like this, it's about risk-benefit. You've seen some cerebrospinal fluid level elevations. What does that truly mean, if it means anything at all? And second, I do want to touch upon your ADOA or autosomal dominant optic atrophy program. What made you decide to start that now?
Yeah. So on elevated CSF protein, it is generally a function of an intrathecal lumbar puncture, which is how we administer our drug, and it's been seen with many drugs that are a lumbar puncture. We have seen elevated CSF, however, we've seen no clinical manifestation of it. So the drug is well tolerated, and as I mentioned earlier, we've now administered over 800 doses, and we've been administering this drug now over up to a 4-year, maybe longer than a 4-year period. So well tolerated. As far as ADOA is concerned, that's autosomal dominant optic atrophy. It's another genetic disease. It causes a progressive loss of eyesight. And as of last night, we announced that we're going into the clinic with an approach that's very similar to Dravet in that we're delivering a deficient protein to the eye. And that protein or gene is OPA1. And so we express OPA1 into the eye, which increases mitochondrial function and energy, which is what the eye needs. And unfortunately, that is what the eye is losing in an ADOA patient. The key data that we had actually was a non-human primate study where, believe it or not, there are non-human primates that have ADOA. This is not a model like a xenograft model in oncology. This is actually a non-human primate that has ADOA. And we were able to inject that monkey, the non-human primates, multiple models or multiple non-human primates. And that data actually showed, based on a fluorescent protein marker, that we upregulated and we improved vision. Not stabilized, we actually improved vision. And so that was the kind of the aha moment preclinically, as well as safety and Jason's work in identifying the patient population and our CMO's work, Barry Tico, his work to say how would we do development of the drug. But that was the day that said, we have a development pathway. If you can potentially improve vision in these slowly progressing loss of vision patients, then you have a development pathway. That was what caused us to move into the clinic and be excited to run the phase 1/2 study.
Thanks a lot for that. Thank you for everyone for coming and for tuning into the webcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us today.